I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
All right. Thank you, Rob. We got a hot one today. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. We've got, man, I'll go ahead and introduce him. We've got Tim Flanigan, who is, through the magic of Zoom, is visiting with us. He's a long way away. He's in Pennsylvania. But he is a retired game warden with a lot of service. And he's got some great stories to tell. He's written a book that's just come out. And it's made its way down there in front of Mr. Bill. We'll tell more about the book there at the end. It came out about 30 days ago. I think guys like us that are interested in wildlife would really enjoy it. But, Tim, we appreciate you joining us here today.
Well, thank you for the honor. I'm really honored, and it's a pleasure to be here. Look forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, well,
based on our little chat before we went on air, I can tell this is going to go well. We have a lot in common, so looking forward to it.
Yeah, so Mr. Tim, you were mentioning before we got started that you had served in the military or something. Could you kind of recap that for us?
Yes, I served in the military during the Vietnam era and had orders for Vietnam as an 81 millimeter mortar team member, 3-man team. But one day got selected to serve in the Old Guard at Arlington Cemetery. The Old Guard is the 3rd Infantry escort to the President. So I served 2 years in the Honor Guard at Arlington Cemetery. What an honor. Got to meet the President, Secretary of State, Department of Defense, Secretary of Defense. It was quite an experience. It was a real blessing.
Wow.
But we also buried an awful lot of people, saw an awful lot of sad parents and wives and children. So there's a price for freedom.
Oh, my goodness.
No doubt. Yeah. He saw that folded up flag on our table that our listeners could see if they're watching on YouTube, and it drew up a bunch of emotions, and he told us that story, and I think we all got chill bumps.
Everybody. Yep. I mean, how can you not get emotional? I think about it all the time. Not to preach on the front of the podcast, but it's just people like that, or people like him. But the people in that cemetery, I mean, those, I know a pro basketball player or a football player. It's just, I know they're kind of the heroes today, but those should be our heroes. The people that did that. I mean, who greater to get our love and our admiration like that? So I know what the world's like, and we're all guilty of it, but I think it's just a great reminder when he talked about Arlington, there's who ought to be your heroes.
No doubt. That is such a special place. Go ahead.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
It was very, very high, and we saw it day after day when we were putting soldiers into the grave and handing those folded flags to the broken-hearted families. It tears the heart out of you.
Oh, I'm sure. Much like battle, from a different perspective. That's tough. That's tough.
We got such a good thing here. I just hope, this country, we got such a great thing. You think about our whole history, go back, and I just hope we don't tear it apart.
Yeah, I was in the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam era. And when I was discharged, I messed around a few years and then went to Mississippi State on the Vietnam Veterans GI Bill. So that was the only way I could afford to go.
That's Mr. Bill Gibson, our kennel master, just making sure our audience knows who that is. Lanny couldn't be with us today. We asked Mr. Bill to sit in here. He's got a lot of law enforcement experience, and I think he can add a lot to this conversation.
Tell him real quick your brief version, your experience in law enforcement, because it goes back a long way.
Yeah, it goes back. I've been retired 30 years this year.
You thought you were retired.
Yeah. People won't leave me alone.
That's not
they
now.
keep giving me jobs.
Everybody wants a dog.
Federal law enforcement, I retired 30 years ago. And worked primarily money laundering and narcotics.
Didn't you get an accounting degree? Is that what
yeah.
That's what I thought. So it's funny.
I got an accounting degree and tried a CPA firm And man, that was no fun.
No, I bet.
I couldn't sit behind that desk every day.
So he was a
counting beans.
forensic accountant, FBI, and tracing money laundering and stuff. Anyway, my short story when we talked about doing the kennel thing together. I was just like, let's just summarize what you think. Well, he brings me a business plan with all the financials and everything pegged out in the future. I was like, wow, I didn't know.
I was his next door neighbor. That's
right.
how I got into this,
to
the dog business. I was training dogs in my yard.
Yep.
And, of course, he kept coming over, and he finally got a little dog from me. And after that, we talked about opening a kennel. So one day I called him. I said, look, I'm 72 years old. I may not live long enough to open a kennel. But
Let's
we
do it.
did,
That's
and
right.
I'll be 80 this year.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, those dogs love him.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, they love
Just
him.
to finish that story and wrap it in a bow and move on forward. It's just that we knew we could do it, especially when he presented the financials and everything. I mean, I knew I could do it. I'm thinking, here we are in this position God put us in to add value to the family, the outdoor families. And there's so many different ways, but man, there's not much more meaningful than a great dog to put in the household with a family, and he was the guy to do it. There was no question. So here we are, and 8 years later, we got a waiting list as long as you're up to your elbow because he helps put great dogs in their houses. So things happen.
I might add, all our dogs come from the United Kingdom.
Yep.
We specialize in British field labs, not show dogs.
Nope.
Good stuff.
Yep. So there you go.
Yep, they have a little accent to them. We get them through that.
A great conservation, too, for
They
duck
are.
hunters and for deer hunters, because we teach them to cold trail deer.
Not to mention Bobby trained his to trail UPS drivers.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right.
We digress. Hey guys, Dudley from Gamekeepers here. I want to tell you about the all-new Gunner Dog Bowl. It's designed for home and built for travel. It's customizable, leak-resistant, light on weight, solid on durability, and rust-proof. Like other Gunner products, they're made in Nashville and designed for everywhere.
See these people? When the clock strikes 5, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. They have to do these things. They have to do those things. Enter the all-new LS Tractor MT2 and MT2E, a relentless force of innovation. Redesigned with a new hood and cab built for comfort and visibility, with enhanced lifting capacity to get the job done. Making these people the ones everyone else calls those people. Visit your local LS Tractor dealer today.
The Furminator is the industry's most versatile piece of food plot equipment, allowing plotters to do every step of the process, working the soil, adding seed and soil supplements, and compacting. From start to finish with a single implement. It's hassle-free by design. Set it for the seed size and simply drive the tractor, and the Furminator does the rest. Check it out at thefurminator.com.
Mr. Tim, we're pleased to have you, and we want, first I want to kind of understand a little bit of the mindset of being a game warden, and kind of how have you went down that path? What led to your stellar career? How did it get started?
Well, I was an outdoorsman from birth. My grandfather raised me. I was a single parent child. He was an outdoorsman, and he taught me how to tell which squirrel was cutting the nuts, and taught me how to hunt and fish and cast a dry fly and take a grouse on the wing. So I was blessed, and at age 30, I'd become quite a successful turkey call maker. I made my own mouth calls, and I was pretty adept at calling in turkeys. And the old game warden would come to the dealership where I worked because I was the head mechanic at an Oldsmobile and American Motors dealership. And he found out I could call turkeys, so morning after morning he had me out calling for his friends, and we formed quite a friendship. One day he showed up and said, "Tim, you ought to try out for the Pennsylvania Game Commission Training School. They're recruiting a new class." And I said, "Oh, I couldn't pass that test." He said, "The heck you can't. You know more about the outdoors than most young men I ever met." So I took the test, scored 98, and I had veterans preference. The next thing you know, I'm in a training school, and 30 years later, I've retired from that career. First we were game protectors, and then wildlife conservation officers, and now we're officially game wardens. Although it doesn't matter what the title is, you're always called the game warden. And as a game warden, we need to realize that when Bill, you're in enforcement, that middle syllable is so important. Force. We have to realize that just our presence is a force, and our presence has to be designed to be friendly, open, helpful, and appreciative of the hunter, because he's the man pays our salary. He's the man that actually applies wildlife management on the ground. Without the hunter, we don't even have wildlife management. So game warden needs to make sure that he knows he's the hunter's friend, and that friendship should be mutual. We should interact with each other for the benefit of wildlife. That's the way I approached the career, because I wanted to treat the hunter as I would have wanted to be treated in my 30 years. And I'm still a hunter, although I put the grouse gun away several years ago when the population started to drop. But we need to work together, both the enforcement officer and the hunter. We're on two sides, but we're actually working together.
You know, it's really interesting. Can you speak to why you think some people, not all people, but some people, they just fear the game warden?
Well, that word force is important. Just the officer's presence is a force. You know, when you're driving down the highway and you see a state police car ahead, you immediately let off the gas. Even if you're driving the speed limit, it's the officer's presence is a force. If you are violating the law, and especially if you know you're violating the law, and the guys I look for were the intentional, premeditated, willful violators. If you're violating the law, you're walking the ragged edge of the legal system, of the rules and regulations, you're going to be apprehensive of that force. And when the officer appears in uniform, that apprehension kicks in immediately. As soon as he starts to ask you a question, it should be a greeting right away. I'm Officer so-and-so, I represent such and such, whatever game commission, whatever agency you work for. And here's the reason I stopped. How you doing today? You know, and that's how you enter a conversation and try to enter an interview or a confrontation. And a lot of our approaches are confrontational because these people are walking that ragged edge. If they're on that ragged edge and they know they're violating the law, they're going to be very apprehensive. And when you're apprehensive, you can disdain that officer that carries the force with him.
I saw Mr. Bill over here nodding his head yes a lot during that statement. That was a good statement. He
understands.
That initial contact can go from a friendly initial contact to the top of the use of force scale to deadly force that quick.
The officer has to be very professional. He should identify himself and state immediately who he works for, because when we put on that uniform, when we put that shoulder patch on our shoulders and a badge on our chest, it's no longer us that we represent. We represent the agency. When we put on that uniform, we have to hang our ego and our attitudes and our biases up in the closet and approach the officer as professional as you possibly can, because it's your agency approaching that officer. We must be very professional and treat the person we're approaching with respect.
If everybody hunting was the same and mirrored that, then you wouldn't have anybody to catch. So there wouldn't be any violations. If they parked their ego, at the house and they were being selfless, then we would all be what's best for the critters, and you wouldn't even have a problem.
We have hunter education, and hunter education in America now is quite good. And throughout my service of 30 years, I found the younger people to be safer with guns and more likely to abide by the regulations because they just had that training. When they are influenced, then after they hunt for a few years, they're being influenced by brothers and older people, their fathers and uncles, who may have that greedy streak and want to shoot over the limit and premeditatedly violate the law. That permeates their attitude. They don't necessarily start out that way. I found most of the night poachers that I apprehended were 30s, 40s, not much into the 50s, but about 30s and 40s, they were the real premeditated killers. Now, most of the game warden's work is in the daytime. It's a specialty working at night. I sort of moved into that. But I find that the young people tend to be open-minded and tend to want to obey the law until they're influenced otherwise. Give you a prime example. A number of years ago, I was assigned an extra district because that officer had been promoted out of the area, and I just completed a hunter education course, a 3-day, 2-night, and a 1 afternoon Saturday course. And on the Saturday course ended just at dark. And after the hunter ed class, I loaded my state vehicle and drove out into the country. I knew I had a deputy nearby, and I drove to a high spot where I could very normally would drive to a high spot and sit and watch. And I had hardly stopped there when I heard a loud rifle shot. And immediately deputy radioed, said, "Tim, did you hear that?" I said, "Yes, I did. Where are you?" And he told me, and we agreed it was probably on a certain road that was a dirt road connected to paved roads. I said, "You block the north end, I'll come from the south." I drove in behind that car in the dark and unperceived. And as I'm watching the car, another shot was fired from the right rear window. And it was one of the kids from that I'd just given a hunter ed card to. When we stopped him at the end of the road, his father said, "Well, you got to learn them to hunt sometime." So that's how it happens. These kids want to do right. A lot of them want to do right, but then they are trained otherwise by that the older, well, family outlaw
influence. Wow,
That's unfortunate, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned the night hunting thing, and in the book that you've got, it really focuses on your experiences bringing some night hunters to justice. I think that's a problem all over with whitetails. You hear about people spotlighting all over. I had just never thought about the Northeast and Pennsylvania and that part of the world.
Yeah. It's everywhere.
With them having that much problem with that.
Well, we have a tremendous amount of deer. Pennsylvania is literally overrun with deer, and we have some very nice trophy deer now with our antler restrictions. One of the things that really increases night hunting here is there are 7 states that touch Pennsylvania. All of them prohibit spotlighting and have for years, but Pennsylvania has always permitted it. You may spotlight wildlife every day of the year up to 11 o'clock at night. It used to be till midnight. So when you have 100 cars out there in your area spotlighting, it's right before deer season. Spotlighting is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. How do you determine which one has the rifle or the bow and arrow or the crossbow is going to shoot a deer? Just because they're spotlighting has no bearing on probable cause or reasonable suspicion. It's a lawful activity. The agency I work for called it a family recreational activity. So it's permitted. And what that does, my district was my house is 27 miles from the Maryland line. I had most of the night poachers by a great degree came from Maryland because spotlighting is prohibited in Maryland. They didn't have the amount of deer we had or the quality of deer, so they would come up into Pennsylvania and shoot deer at night. Those people, many of them went to jail. Back in those days, if you couldn't pay the fine immediately, you went immediately to jail. So it was, we actually tend to invite them in here because spotlighting is legal.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I don't even know, is it legal in Alabama or Mississippi?
I want to say now they consider it like harassment of wildlife to shine a spotlight on them.
I'm pretty sure you can't even drive down the highway and there's a big buck or something and just turn your headlights towards it. I don't think. Correct. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And so it sounds like they've hidden this in, this is how people scout. And apparently, so, or you just ride around with your family and look at the pretty animals at night with a light.
Right.
But,
so
it sure makes it a lot easier to choose to, make the wrong decision.
Likewise, it's against the law to have a loaded weapon in the car at night. It's also against the law to spotlight because they get you for harassment of game when you do that. So they pretty well got the law to help the game wardens to enforce the law and ensure that we're not getting a lot of night hunting.
Yeah, except where he is. They do here, yes.
Yeah.
I think
Now-
the biggest problem I hear around here is more and more is of night, not just night hunter, but road hunting at night. And they'll have bait spots, and a lot of the game wardens, they'll watch for crows or, signs that someone's pouring out a bag of corn or whatever from inside of the road on a place they think they'll have, a big deer or something. And then they ease around at night, and they just pop it on and pop it off, real discreetly. So it's hard to catch unless you're laying in wait and you kind of find their traces and tracks. The deer decoy has changed things, though.
If my memory serves me correct, back when I was at Mississippi State, it was not against the law to spotlight rabbits at night, ride on the hood of the car and shoot rabbits.
I'm
So
sure
that
at one point,
created-
yeah.
Yeah, that created a problem. We didn't have many deer back then, though.
That's right.
If you saw a deer track, that was amazing. If you saw a deer, that was super amazing.
Yep.
But now, deer everywhere.
Bill's comment about loaded guns in vehicles is key. These fellas, the night killers especially, are usually under some kind of influence, either alcohol and increasingly controlled substances.
Wow.
They handle guns poorly. I've had these fellas shoot through the back seats, the back of a seat, almost kill a man in the front seat. I've had them shoot their toe, one foot completely off, toes off, fingers off, earlobe. They'll shoot into houses because when you have a spotlight on a nice buck, you have tunnel vision on that buck, and the crosshairs usually go on the eyes, trying for a headshot. That bullet doesn't stop there, and often it misses the eyes, blows the face off the deer, and he dies a miserable death. But we had many houses and barns and animals shot into, even cars and the side of a school bus shot into by night hunters. They are a danger to themselves and a danger to the public. And they have very little disregard for safety of the public. They're just shooting. We all realize we need a backstop. If we're shooting target, we need a bullet backstop. These guys don't care. They just shoot at the deer, and whatever happens, happens. And I had a number of houses shot through and some very near fatalities because of it.
That's crazy. And I don't want to spoil anything, but when I was going through your book, there were a couple of incidences that I came across where you were right. These people are so affixed on that buck, trying to shoot it that, you're able to get really close to them. There was one story that I'm not going to give away, but it was awesome. And they just had no idea you were anywhere in the world and didn't even think about it, but you were all over them the whole time. It's wild.
Yeah, that's done by, well, let me preface it with this book tells the inside story that really hasn't been told. As a matter of fact, there are an awful lot of conservation officers who never saw a night shooting. They react to the report of the shooting, much like police do. Police react to a called-in crime. To apprehend these hunters, you have to remain, these night shooters, you have to remain completely invisible. And that demanded the developing of a way to use a tactical use of your eyesight to be able to drive a car without lights at all kinds of speeds and back up. I've had high-speed chases in reverse without lights, and to walk up on these people. I've been right beside people on foot when they shot a deer, and I've actually had to fall down on my belly and they shine the light right over top of me. Didn't know I was beside them. And that's all accomplished by remaining invisible, if at all possible, and being very, very alert of everything around you. The slightest little glint off a bumper or a windshield or a touch of a light on a cloud may trigger you to, hey, there's possible poacher over there. We got into many cases just by paying attention to little flickers of light, something that was out of place, but then you have to remain invisible. And we had one of my apprehended fellows was telling a story one time, and he said, and all of a sudden up jumped a devil. I don't know where he came from, So we every now and then I tell my wife, well, I'm going to go out tonight and play up Jump the Devil.
Moultrie was first in feeders since 1979 and is the leader in total game management. They're taking feeding to another level with the new Ranch Series line of durable and versatile feeders, perfect for both wildlife and domestic livestock. So Dudley, you can feed your goats. Whether you're a deer hunter, a hobby farmer, a land manager, or a rancher, Moultrie has you covered with several kit options, including a rotating auger, broadcast, or a gravity kit. And these feeders are 300 or 450 pounds. They're big feeders. All right, so guys, Moultrie is offering our listeners a 15% site-wide discount at moultriefeeders.com. Use code Mossy Oak with a capital M, Mossy Oak, at moultriefeeders.com and get that 15% discount.
Nosler is known for their bullets, and now they're making suppressors. Nosler suppressors are made for hunting. Adding a Nosler suppressor to your rifle will make you a quieter, more accurate, and more effective hunter. Protect your hearing and disturb less game with a Nosler suppressor. The time to hunt quiet is now. Learn more at nosler.com.
Hey, this is Toxic Hayes with Mossy Oak. You know, hunting and fishing, game keeping, and taking care of the land with my family is my life. And I'll be honest with you, the one app that I'm on every day and use more than anything is OnX. It literally has changed my life. From property ownership to roads, everything to do with understanding the land better. I even use it to plot acreages all the time. Every function I could dream of. Use coupon code Mossy Oak to save 20% on your next OnX subscription. Trust me, you'll be so glad you did.
I was hoping you could tell a couple of these stories. They were just really incredible and kind of let our audience hear a little bit of this.
Yeah, let me give you a little rundown there. One of the key values, one of the most precious things any officer has is public information.
Yeah.
If the public informs you, hey, they've been shooting down here, we're hearing shots at night, you need to take that seriously, respond to it immediately. If you can handle that situation, make an arrest, then you need, and you keep that information absolutely confidential. No one knows about that between the informant and you, but thank them and let them know when you make that apprehension. If you have information like that, the shooting's going on in an area, that can help you target the area. Most nights, I'm just moving from a high spot, from one high spot to another, stopping, watching and listening. Spend thousands of hours laying on the hood of a car. We're standing on the back of the deer rack on the back, just listening and looking, watching for any hint. But when you have targeted information, and one of the ones that you just said about may take you a while to apprehend them, we had for 3 years, every weekend we were having trophy bucks killed in what we call Cumberland Valley Township. It's a long U.S. Route 220 runs through a valley bordered by two beautiful mountains that are alive with deer. And there's some nice bucks. And every weekend we were losing bucks shot in left leg. Every weekend. And it always happened at about 3-4 in the morning. Worked that case and could not get into these guys. Finally, one night, a deputy and I were sitting on watch near this highway where we could see a good section of that valley. And a truck slowed down, and this shooting was always from small foreign trucks. This truck slowed down, and as I'm watching with binoculars, my deputy was taking a nap because he had work to do in the morning. I elbowed him, said, "Bob, they're working the light." He said, "I can't see it." It was just a small battery operated handheld light. We got behind those fellas, didn't follow them very far before they shot a real nice buck. Shot him right in the face with a .22 Magnum. It shot the jaw off of him. I killed him the next day. He was laying in a stream trying to get some water. Those fellas were a bouncer. They were two brothers, and they worked as a bouncer and a ticket taker at dances on the weekends in two towns north of there. So their timing after the dances would close at 1 or 2 in the morning, they would be coming down through that valley and shooting bucks. And finally, we blundered into them. I was one of their, and they bragged about it. They said, we never shoot does. We only shoot bucks. And no, we don't pick them up. They were dressed very nicely. We don't want to get dirty. We just like killing bucks. That's the kind of people that are out there. There are very few night poachers who need meat. They're shooting for the thrill of it, to get over on the game warden, to brag to their friends back at the bar, or just plain fun of shooting and killing something. I don't know how they can call that fun, but it becomes ingrained in them that this is something to get over on the game warden and brag to your friends by killing a hapless animal. It's a dreadful situation. Oh, and by the way, you said it's been going on for years. An old game warden said, Tim, you got to quit working so hard. They were killing deer before you were born, and they're going to be killing them after you're gone. And that is quite true. So we do need the enforcement officer, and we need that public that's willing to call in and say, hey, something's going on here.
During these years of doing this, how did you become a specialist in going after the night hunters?
I just spent so much time at it. And very few officers did that. Not to disparage the officers. Everybody has a different way of working. But I realized early on that the really despicable, premeditated killer and the wasted wildlife to a great degree was the night hunter. So I wanted to target him. And I learned very quickly on it wasn't easy. You had to spend thousands of hours out at night. And for some strange reason, and I believe it's because of these dedicated night poachers think that on real bad weather days and nights, the game warden won't be out there. Some of my best nights for apprehending poachers was when the weather was horrendous. And it's most of that shooting was, spotlighting was legal up till midnight, now to 11. When you saw a light after that time, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, you immediately had an on-site violation and probable cause. You don't stop that man right away. You follow that and watch that vehicle. Sometimes I'd follow them for a half hour to an hour, and all of a sudden they'd shoot a deer. So if you can the longer the officer can remain undetected, the more evidence, the more he sees and the more evidence he gains. So it just takes time, effort, and dedication. And it's a lot of time away from your family.
Did you ever engage other branches of law enforcement?
Yes, quite often, because our clientele often tended to overlap. On one day's time in deer season, we encountered 3 murderers. One his case had been dismissed by an arrogant magistrate that said, "Oh, okay, I can dismiss a murder case," and he did. It was a premeditated, point blank shot with a 3-inch Magnum shotgun in the man's chest. Another was a fellow released from he'd served his term and he was on probation. He was released from shooting a man through a barroom window down in Baltimore. The man was awaiting apprehension, and that his story is in that book. He was living in a shack up on a mountainside, hiding out from the law. He'd stabbed a drug dealer to death, stabbed him 13 times. That was in one day's time. A lot of the people that we encountered were convicted felons. They were burglars. A lot of them were fugitives. A lot of them were on probation. And the state police in Pennsylvania and Maryland, we interacted with them constantly. And the Maryland DNR and I worked together tremendously. One of the fellows I arrested down in that valley we talked about near the Maryland line was a Maryland game warden with 13 years experience. Wow. And he was engaged with a party. It was a market hunting. They were shipping deer carcasses, deer meat across state lines, which is a federal violation. I carried a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Deputy badge. Yep. If you any game that is taken unlawfully and then moved across the state line, when it crosses that line, that's a violation of the Lacey Act, and the penalties kick in really strongly then. So this takes a lot of dedication, a lot of time, and respecting and interacting with those fellow agencies is vitally important. By the way, in Pennsylvania, fish and game are separate. It's the only state in the United States where fish and game are separate. But we were empowered to enforce the fish law. I basically enforced game law, but we also helped the Fish Commission and did patrol for them. And we also were empowered to enforce the crimes code, but not summary things like stop sign and traffic offenses. I've made several DUI arrests and HUI arrest, hunting under the influence. Was an instructor for that discipline. It's very, very, it's an intense, but a vital need, the HUI. And boating under the influence is really serious stuff. You can't walk away from a boat accident. So
I was wondering, did you find, just weaving that thread of fishing along with, is there just like a culture of night people that thrive on that, feeling like they're, doing, I don't know, it just seems like there's just almost a culture to it from reading excerpts from the book.
yes, you're right. And they take advantage of the cover of darkness. A friend of mine, an outdoor writer friend of mine, said, "What is it about people in society?" And I've arrested preachers, priests, superintendents of state parks, and superintendents of fish hatcheries, superintendents of schools. It's something about being unseen, putting a gun in a man's hand, putting him in the woods where he's not seen. He'll violate the law because he feels nobody can see me. Well, that is multiplied in darkness. The fellow that's acting in darkness feels he's going to get away with it. Pretty sure he's going to get away with it. For the blessing is that the officer operates in darkness too, and that's a real benefit to be invisible in the dark when you're watching a violator. It's actually kind of addictive.
I got the sense from reading his book that he enjoys catching somebody as much as we would enjoy
more.
Yeah, killing a big deer.
I would say more.
I think he spends so much time locked in on trying to catch a certain person. Have you got any? What's your, like, one of the stories that you're more proud of? Is there one that just kind of stands out to you that you put in a lot of work and everything worked out?
Oh boy, there's so many of them. And when you follow a vehicle, whether you're on foot, following people with spotlighting on foot in the field with a rifle, or you're behind them in a car, waiting for them to shoot, and when that fire flies out of that barrel, and I would get little spasms in my back. It's like ooh, adrenaline kicking. I've got to apprehend these people, and it's going to be confrontational. And he has a deadly weapon, and they're out to kill. So it's an interesting pursuit. And you're right. I did take great pleasure in arresting these night killers, because he's like the big buck, and I'm the hunter. Making a successful apprehension of a night hunter who can shoot back and who can resist, and many of them do, to a great degree, as you've probably read in the book. It's quite a thrill, but you still have to treat those people with respect. If you get on their level, the foul language and death threats, every one of these guys, almost every one of them, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to blow your blank and blank, whatever. You have to just ignore that and remain professional. If you start to curse, if you say hell, they'll say you said much worse. So you cannot use curse words. You cannot get down on their level. You cannot yell at them. You have to remain very, very professional, because it's not you're representing. It's the law enforcement agency and the law you're representing. And that has to be done in a respectable, professional manner.
Absolutely. And that should carry out into other professions, but even more so in law enforcement.
So, Mr. Tim, you mentioned in the book, maybe in the first year of employment, you had a situation that it could have gotten ugly pretty quick. Did that one event, that teach you something? Did you take away with something that helped you further down the road?
That is a key question, and that is one of the best things that happened to me in my law enforcement career. The first year, what it taught me is always expect the unexpected. Earlier, I mentioned I was a single parent child, and my grandfather raised me. First year in the field, out of the training school, this happened. There was a father, a big man, hunting with two children, and they were hunting, two small boys. They were hunting in a restricted area. I had 7 other individuals under arrest at the time. A student officer of mine, a student officer of the training school, and a deputy applicant were writing the information for them up when they noticed this man and said, "Hey, you're pinching us. How about that guy? So I went to approach this man. It resulted in a very sudden attempt at killing me with a Model 37 Ithaca shotgun jammed in my stomach, and I was able to push it aside. And we fought. We were tussling over that gun. I had the student officer had a nightstick with him in case they had 13. The other group had 13 dogs, and I said maybe take that nightstick and just so you have in case you have to bump a dog away from your leg. I shoved that down in my belt, and while I'm tussling with this man over the shotgun, he grabbed that club and hit me over the head 2 powerful blows. I didn't realize it, but he had opened my scalp up real seriously. So I eventually stepped behind him, pushed him down, ended up on top of him with my right thumb and his mastoid, and my left arm is tied up with tussling over this shotgun, and suddenly there were 2 streams of blood pouring onto his face. And he said, "Get your filthy blanking pig blood off of me, you filthy blanking pig." At that time, I realized, oh, that's my blood. This could be bad. And I pulled a very small Model 36 Smith & Wesson. The only gun we carried was a snub-nosed Model 36 5-shot, round ball ammunition in it. I shoved that up under his chin, and his response was, you better hope that little blanking thing doesn't go off. Eventually, he decided maybe that was the wrong attitude, and he dropped his resistance. I threw the shotgun away. It was loaded with the safety off, by the way, around the chamber when he shoved it into my belly. I got him under arrest when I had to walk him about. He sent his boys home. They were hunting from the house, but I had to walk him about 200 yards back to my car and my student officers. And they didn't recognize me. I was so soaked with blood. And I looked in the mirror, the mirror of the window of the car. I didn't recognize myself. What that taught me was never expect. When I saw this man with these boys, being a single parent kid, I thought, boy, look at that. What a nice scene. I'd never expected what happened. As soon as I approached the man, he tried to kill me and then put me in the hospital. I had to go to the hospital and get some blood and get some stitches. And so it made me think always. It taught me to always expect the unexpected. And I've told a lot of young officers, you have to be, as we talked about, polite and professional, because the sportsman is our friend. He's our client. When you approach him, you have to be, hey, how you doing? Seeing any squirrels? You got to be kind of like Barney Fife on the outside and Dirty Harry on the inside. You have to be polite and fun and happy and welcoming, but ready to respond at the slightest indication of trouble. And,
that's good stuff right there.
That is incredible.
A sudden threat to your life can happen very, very quickly. On a number of occasions, I've had it happen with coon hunters. You slip up behind the coon hunters, and they'll wheel around and hold you at gunpoint. And I've had farmers hold me at gunpoint and threaten to kill me. And the finest asset, and I mentioned this in the book, the finest asset that a field officer has is a sharp mind and a tactful tongue. Our agency taught a discipline called verbal judo. What a wonderful course that is. And it's a very intense instruction course on how to use your thoughts, your mind, and how to listen tactfully and respond tactfully. And if you do it properly, you'll never have to apply deadly force. I've come as close as trigger pressure to taking a man's life. But in all of those incidences, I never had to hurt a person.
Verbal judo.
We
need that around here or something.
Yeah, we need to take a course in that for sure.
Mr. Bill, how does this, when you listen to him, when I read his book, it just never crossed my mind that a game warden would have so many threats against his life. Mr. Tim, would I be safe in saying you've had multiple life-threatening encounters that could have gone the other way pretty easily?
Oh yes, many, and hundreds and hundreds of threats. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to blow your blanking guts out. Blow your head off. I've had my property damaged. Just interference in every way. My wife and I, for many years, could not go out to dinner anywhere without being harassed. I've even had broken glass in my food in restaurants because in a rural area like this, they hate the game warden, and it seems to be a pervasive thing throughout the rural society here. And it's not just the poor people. It's some of the higher people in society that are like that, and it's hard to understand.
Bill, have you ever heard of such around? I mean, this
Here?
is well. I'm just,
Yeah, they threatened to put a $50,000 contract on me one time, and I told them, I said, go ahead, but many of you will die before you'll get me. So when I got up out of bed in the morning, I put a machine pistol under my pajamas and walked out, got my paper, and came back in the house. And I carried about a 30, 40 shot clip. So you just got to be prepared.
Let me add something to that. In that case, it not only educated me on being alert and always alert, but it also opened my eyes to political interference. That man was he was a close relative of the ruling the ruling party, political party in that county. He got 5 years probation and paid the court costs for aggravated assault with intent to kill,
Which is a felony.
Yes,
Obviously, yeah.
5 years probation, paid the court costs. The judge says, anything else you'd like, officer? I said, I'd like to have the shotgun he tried to kill me with. He said, give the officer the gun. So I had that barrel shortened on that and carried it as a riot gun in the car for years.
Yeah, like you, I worked a lot at night on drug dealers, and we always lived by the old Bible saying, men love the darkness because their deeds are evil.
Amen.
So we always knew we were working with evil people, and
Amen.
we were always prepared.
Yeah, fear of apprehension really controls people. And we talked about force early on. Just you appearing causes a fear of apprehension in anyone that's doing wrong. And that will cause them to do things such as retaliate violently. You got to be alert and be ready.
What are some other things you've had done just where, people that didn't like you, like anything, did they throw anything in your yard or, mess with your mailbox? What are some examples of things that have happened over the years?
Oh, I've had them harass around my house, do donuts in my yard, put deer heads and blood on my car if I was on a day off, or rarely home at night, but they'd throw deer hair and blood and guts on my car. I've had all the wires cut under the hood of my car. My car was parked at a repair shop. It was a Jeep Cherokee at the time, and people next door ran a business and they were poachers. They were night poachers. I'd prosecute them. They came over through the night, guests through the night, and cut all the wiring harnesses on the car, flattened the tires. I've had my tires flattened, the cars damaged. I've been run into, forced off the road. I had my barn shot into. Always early on, my daughter had some horses. They were always threatening to kill my horses and burn the barn. And of course, I'd tell them, well, I'm going to report this threat to the state police. So guess who we're going to come look for first when the barn starts to smoke. So yeah, that kind of stuff was constant. And I still can't avoid I constantly fear or expect smart talk or game warden hate talk wherever I go. I just can't seem to get out of it, even though I've been retired 19 years this June. So it stays with you.
Mr. Tim, we have the utmost respect for the game wardens, and you think about them, they're out there a lot of times by themselves, and everybody they approach, except in a fishing scenario, probably has got a shotgun or a rifle, and so it's inherently dangerous. Mm-hmm. And then when I think about like modern times, Mr. Tim, and I think about some of maybe the illegal stuff that may be going on with cooking drugs and stuff, there's just a lot of bad scenarios for one by himself law enforcement officer who's rural. Is some of the modern techniques that they have today, the electronics, the computers on board the trucks, are the guys
taking night vision technology has to be really make things difficult.
Can that? Do the guys have it a little? I guess do they have a little more help on their sides now with all this technology?
Yeah, they certainly do. And one of the things they have is a cell phone. Back in the days, my early days when we were working, I had to memorize. We had a few in the rural area. There are a few payphones, and I memorized those numbers. So the office would radio, "Can you call in?" and say, "Give me an hour to get to a phone," and I'd say, "Call this number." I had them all memorized or written in my logbook. Nowadays, the officer can respond immediately with a cell phone. The other thing, if we needed search warrants or we needed anything from the magistrate's office, especially a search warrant, and almost always search warrant needs would arise at night, late at night, and the magistrate that's on call would almost always be the furthest one away, 30, 40-mile drive. Back then, we had to drive to the magistrate's office, sit down and type out a request form, and with all your probable cause. If he deemed the search warrant issuable, he would give you the search warrant. You drive 30 or 40 miles back, issue the search warrant, and by sometimes that on a few occasions much of the evidence was hidden by then. The officer today can just turn over to his computer in his car, type in a request for a search warrant, email it to the magistrate. It's emailed back, and he can serve the search warrant. Well, we had to write citations and issue it to the man. Non-residents, often we had to cuff them and take them to jail, take them to the magistrate, and take them to jail. Nowadays, none of that is with electronics. We can follow people pretty much anywhere. They just type the citation out on the computer. It prints it out. You hand it to the man, he signs it, and you're done. So it's a much different job now with the electronics. And I heard one of you say night vision. That is a real aid. So are the body cameras. Quite often, people that I dealt with, one that was especially notable was a coon hunter man with these children. Had a very nice interaction with them, although everything they were doing was wrong. They were hunting on Sunday. The boys didn't have a license, and they tossed a loaded gun in the vehicle. And I gave them a break on everything. I had a deputy with me. We had a nice training session there on safety and abiding by the law, and hoped that bit them very well. And I sure hope we don't meet like this again. The next day, he called in the most vile accusation of how I slammed his boys around and threatened to shoot him, and just you're up against that as well. And that's why I said so much about acting professional. You have to be professional, and it's good to have a witness with you. Almost always at night I was alone, but it's great to have a witness, and because they will lie, no doubt about it.
Tox, you mentioned the night vision, but that's got to be a big help to the game wardens. But that's also got to be a big help to the guy who's trying to poach, I would suppose.
Oh yeah. Years ago, I had a loan of what they called a starlight scope. This was shortly after Vietnam. I borrowed a starlight scope. I made one night arrest with it for shooting. The other arrest I made was two families and their children driving their cars through the mature cornfield, driving two pickup trucks through this private cornfield. The land was open to public hunting, so it let me enforce the law there. I watched them picking corn and filling the beds of those trucks by driving some of the corn down and throwing the rest of it in the bed of the truck because they were raising some pigs. I got to watch that all through a starlight scope. So, and that prosecution was part mine and part state police. I arrested them for damaging the crop, and the state police for the theft. So.
Wow. Well, look.
I can remember a couple of people, like calling names, obviously, but a wildlife law officer that I think he got the Warden of the Year 2 or 3 times for the whole state of Mississippi. And listening to different ones, the way they put it, he said, look, if I'm doing my job, 70% of it is not enforcement. It's public relations is the way he put it, which, it involves a lot of different things. He said, if I'm really doing a great job, so much of what I do is like public relations. And I, at first, didn't really, I kind of got it, but the more as time goes on, I listen to you talk, listen to more, and we've got, friends that are around, other officers, listening to them, what that goes on. I see what he was saying and how important it is that they strive to help, us a little bit what we'd like to do, if we could, is, not be preachy about it at all, but just help people see a better way. It's so much better than having to use force. Now, again, when it comes to protecting the resource and the safety of people too, you just have to use force or we don't have anything. But it just seems like, man, if we could just help people see a better way, they're just almost like they're caught in a trance of this obsession with doing things, or obsession. I mean, some of it, I hate to say, is driven by worried about what people think, and trying to brag about it. I hate it.
You're absolutely correct about the public relations. And in reality, law enforcement was a small part of our job. We disposed of all the roadkills. We handled all the crop damage complaints. We taught hunter ed. We did youth field days, school programs. Any fraternal organization wanted a school program or a program for their meetings, we were there to do it. We did more public relations and more public instruction, and saw that as much more valuable than law enforcement. Law enforcement becomes valuable when the public appreciates it. I started my writing career because I learned that the local newspaper was interested in things that were going on out there at night. And in the day, I would go into the newspaper office late at night and write a column by hand. I'd print it out by hand and they would publish it in the paper. I learned right then that the local people, the local poachers actually really appreciated it when you caught a poacher from Maryland. So good law enforcement, not chicken crap law enforcement. I should say, we talked about officer professionalism. There are officers that are very badge happy. They're proud of their power and they rub it in the public's nose. And they will make any kind of small nitpicking pinch they can. That is the most horrible public relations you can have. Mm-hmm. When you make good arrests for people that are damaging the resource, and my bottom line was, arrest the man who's damaging the resource, who's using another person's tag to take more deer, who's shooting deer over bait, who's shooting more over his limit and hiding it. And people make mistakes. When a person makes a mistake or a rules and regulations violation, you handle that with a training session and a warning. We had a lot of warnings. Here's an example. Before I became a game warden, I was hunting pheasants down in southeastern Pennsylvania, and I'd killed 2 pheasants, daily limit. I was right by my car in some heavy grass. I was bent over while I was kneeling in the grass, dressing these pheasants out. And my Weimaringer that I had at the time went on point right beside my right arm. And I kept saying, "What's the matter with you?" And he reached down and grabbed a cock pheasant hiding in the grass and crunched it dead. Well, now I'm 1 bird over the limit. Well, that kind of stuff happens. Hunting woodcock with my friend, U.S. Fish and Wildlife agent friend, he occasionally would shoot three birds, and one of the 3 birds he wingtipped or flew away, and he'd shoot another bird, and 2 times he was over the limit. People make mistakes and accidents happen, and the officer has to be open to understand that and be lenient and be kind to the public. Be fair to the public. We all want to be treated fairly. The old golden rule. So.
Yeah, it's easy to erode the trust. A law-abiding hunter, if the game warden is not operating in a professional manner, like you were talking about. And recently, I don't know if you've heard of this, in Tennessee, there was a vote that took some of the rights away from conservation officers. And in fact, they now have to have a search warrant to enter private property to search for, bait or anything like that. And I can't help but think that some of that stemmed from conservation officers that were not acting with respect.
Yeah, I bet so. And, at least today, what he pointed out, it's not the barrier it used to be, to get a search warrant, since electronic time's allowed a lot faster. But yeah, I'll bet you that too. That abuse of that power, yeah, it's a bad thing.
And I don't know a whole lot about that scenario. Maybe a listener or two could fill us in on that. But yeah, that just happened in Tennessee.
Yeah. Tim, you may know something about it. I've been trying to keep my finger on the pulse because worried or concerned that might spread out a little bit just from Tennessee, because what they're saying is a guy, he couldn't go on private property and look around at all.
In Mississippi,
without
you can.
Yeah.
You can go on private property. You just can't go search the curtilage. The curtilage defined as the area around the house, which is normally maintained, grass mowed and things like that. But anything else, a game warden can go on it, or I could go on it as a law enforcement officer.
You may be exactly right, but there's something new, though,
I
Mr.
think
Bill.
the Supreme Court in Tennessee may have changed that.
Yeah, he's talking about Mississippi, not Tennessee.
Yeah.
Tennessee just said, so if you've got private land in Tennessee, the game warden cannot go on it unless you tell him he can go on
Or
it.
he gets a
Or he's got
search
a
warrant.
warrant. Yeah. But he's got to have probable cause to have the warrant.
And so I understand there's probably viewpoints on both sides. I'm not trying to take a side on that, for our listeners, but it's really interesting.
Yes.
So
yeah, because I mean, unfortunately, the officers that abuse, the same as all kind of law enforcement, they give the great heroes we should look at they give them a bad name, and they make it harder for people to do their job. That's a great example right here. I'm sure that's how that came about.
I think like in restrictive state, like Tennessee going restrictive, they could go get a U.S. Fish and Wildlife officer, and he could enter that property with the local officer under federal statute.
probably so.
Yeah, they take precedence over local and state.
So, Tim, do you know anything about this?
Just a little bit, nothing really for sure. But his comment about the behavior of the officer and the attitude of the officer may have caused this, and that's so true. If the officers are pushing their power, our powers are limited. It's when I mentioned about the spotlighting. You have to have probable cause or reasonable suspicion to make a traffic stop. You should have abide by that same standard before entering someone's property. Our property is precious to us. The remark about the curtilage is true. The close proximity to the house, you should have a search warrant to go in there. And then I've been able to look right in the garage window or in the garage from out in the street and see the illegal deer hanging there. But still, you can't just walk into that house because you see that. To go on private property to search for evidence, you should have some good information, some reasonable cause, some probable cause or reasonable suspicion that you can articulate to the court if you're challenged. And everyone has the right to take a case to court. If you're challenged, you should be able to articulate, this is why I'm on there. I had this tip. We saw this. We heard this. We heard the shots. We saw the lights, whatever. That's why we went on the property. So the officer has to be professional in every way. And when they're not, they can cause things like this.
So go ahead, Mr. Bill.
If you saw an illegal deer hanging there, would you call another officer in to keep an eye on that while you went to get a warrant?
Yeah, and let me tell you a quick story about that. I had a case. This boy actually was a convicted felon. He had a shed below his parents' house, and I was there poking around one morning. Had a lot of probable cause. I found 5 turkey gobblers in closed season, a bobcat in closed season, a white head and hide of a fawn deer taken in closed season, and a stolen trap. Well, I had to go get a search warrant. I could see all this stuff looking through the window, and the turkeys were stuffed in underneath the shed. I actually pulled them out and looked at them. He'd cut the beards off of them. He made turkey jerky out of the breast and would save all the beards. That search warrant uncovered so much stuff, we charged him with 52 turkeys over the limit for his lifetime, plus marijuana. He was selling marijuana, but I had to leave there to get a search warrant. So I radioed her for a deputy to come down, and I said, how about keeping an eye on, I'll call him Van, keep an eye on Van's place till I get back with a search warrant. As he drove down by the driveway, van came running down through the road and fired 2 high-powered rifle shots somewhere toward his vehicle. We don't know if he missed or if he shot over the top of it. He recognized the deputy's truck. Deputy's not marked, but he's in uniform, and he saw him and shot at him with a high-powered rifle. By the time I got back, that deputy had seen a trooper out along the highway run a radar. He ran out there, drove out there and got him and came back, and they stood guard till we served the search warrant and found all of that evidence. About a week later, maybe a month later, that fellow who's a convicted felon tried to sell me a shotgun on the street of the little town near where he lived. And the ATF had told me, I knew them real well, out of Johnstown, Pennsylvania. He said, if you ever see him with a firearm, by the way, these convicted felons can have flintlocks, but not modern firearms. So I said, call us right away. So I did. I called him. We filled him in with all this information, and they assaulted that property and searched that house. And oh my God, the illegal game evidence that we got out of his freezer and the home was unbelievable. And when it all went to court, the court chose to plead him guilty of 1 count of marijuana possession. Left all of the game cases go. So
that's so bad.
When you saw all that stuff in there, and you went to get a warrant, and a deputy was looking after the property, was it permissible for the deputy to enter the property as soon as you called and said, "I've got a warrant, I'm on the way"? Because normally all we would require, we could go ahead and make an entry, but we could not leave the property until we left a list of items that were seized.
Yeah. I wouldn't ask him to enter that property until we had the warrant in hand. And yes, anything you seized, you had to give a receipt for. That's true, and that was true at night. We seized an awful lot of rifles, spotlights, ammunition, and a couple times I seized vehicles. I took a Chevy Silverado one night, a brand new Chevy Silverado with 1,200 miles on it, and it didn't make the boy's father very happy. But you have to give him receipt for all of that.
Right.
But with what I mentioned about the court there, not just rural courts, but it seems like courts throughout the country tend to treat game laws, wildlife laws, as trivial.
They do, yeah.
And especially here in this state, our magistrates are elected, and they're good old boys. They really don't like to find a lot of people guilty. And I've actually had magistrates said, "Officer, you've proved your case. He's guilty, but I go by the old law, and I just don't think Mr. So-and-so would do something like that. And he's a friend. I dismiss this case." That happens so many times.
So-and-so that would help reelect him. Yeah.
Yes.
Probably. I hear that thrown around when you're around. It's like, "Oh, this is terrible. This county's terrible. We can't get a conviction. We can't get a conviction." And then, you hear them, they really appreciate it. It's like, "How's things going?" "Oh, man, we got a great judge." Yeah, they don't mess around. They're very protective of wildlife stuff. So, it should be important to everybody. Of course, their job is to be fair, not just to lean one way or the other. But, that resource in that life, is just as important.
So that brings up a question I'd like to ask. So someone listening to this that maybe leases land, or maybe they've got a small place or a large place, can you give some advice of how they can work with their game warden, or they could make friends with their game warden so that they can have somebody help them?
Yeah, we really Pennsylvania has a couple programs where private land can be signed up to be open to public hunting. And when you have that kind of an agreement, that enables the officer to do various things. It gives them a copy of our state magazine, and it also requires us to pay special attention, with law enforcement attention, to that property. But any person that has private property and is concerned about trespass and violators should approach their local conservation officer and make a friend out of him, because keep lines of communication open. Today, most officers won't give out their private number, but they should have some way that those people can contact them when they're concerned, and know that they're contacting a friend, and know that officer will respond. And when he responds, he must do his best to make something out of that information and report back to them. That's our obligation. As not very little wildlife lives on state lands. And here in Pennsylvania, we have millions of acres of state game lands, state forests, national forests, state parks. But this wildlife might live in that forest. A lot of these deer are in our game lands, but they're going down that farmer's fields to really eat the alfalfa and that young corn and so forth. So we have to have concern for him and be responsible to his concerns. That's part of the job.
I want to add to that, Bobby. I think it's important for us as like hunters too, that I think what he says right, but however you want to do that, and look it up, call them, introduce yourself. I'd say take them on your place if you've got a place that but the biggest thing I would say is be so respectful of their job and their time. I'm always I'm a time person, and we all have the same amount. I make it a point, I've never called about anything unless I'm really sure about it. Or if I do, I would just say, hey, I'm passing this along. I'm not sure it's true, so you don't have to drop everything and run down there, unless you've got time. Just be sure, and don't call them all the time, every little thing. I think this, be sure you have something worthy of their time. That's kind of one of my things I would say, is make that friendship, have them on the place, invite them. Let them go hunting, whatever that takes. They're a person just like you. They're not just a game warden.
Yeah.
Become friends with them, but respect their time. That's my big point I want to make.
So let me ask this, Toxie. Have you heard? I want to make sure if this is right. I've heard other people say that sometimes they would just tell a game warden about something and, boy, this is happening, and then they catch the guy. The game warden maybe spends some effort, some time, catches somebody, and then that landowner not prosecute them. And that almost leads to, like the game warden has spent all this effort.
Not really. I may have heard that. Nothing comes to mind immediately. But how could you expect that guy to come next time you call? Too?
Yes, that's kind of the point I was getting to.
There have been a couple of cases where things happen, and maybe not me, but someone real close to me, and the question was asked, if I go do this, are you going to back me up?
Yeah.
Saying, are you willing to prosecute it? Because they want to know. And I understand that they are wasting their time if you're not going to.
Yeah.
And when the answer was yes, they went ahead.
Right. So, Tim, I tell you, this book is called Night Killers, Blood Lusting Poachers. Guys, this is really interesting. And Tim spent a lot of effort putting this together. These stories go back a long time because, sometimes there's no cell phone or texting. You think, boy, if he could just get on his cell phone and call somebody. But he didn't have that option back then. But this is a really good book. I'm impressed.
And Bob,
we hope it's the first of three. I've got quite a number of other chapters written. I hope to make a series out of it. It's a different book than most game warden books because it tells the inside story. There's an awful lot of technique required to catch these committed night killers, and I tell that technique. So it's a bit different than a lot of game warden books that are telling stories about the minor apprehensions, and not to disparage any of those. They're all good, and I'd buy every one that comes out. This one's a little different because it's the inside story and it's the real stuff.
Yeah.
It's looking down gun barrels and it's hairy out there at night. It really is. And I had a guy empty a revolver at me, 6 shots of a 38 revolver one night, and managed to duck that. So
goodness
it's a challenge, but it's when you do make that apprehension, like we talked about before, that's a real, that's a trophy. That's like the man getting the big buck. We've caught the premier poacher. The guy that's out there at night is a premeditated criminal. And we must be very careful to keep these outlaws, these criminals, separated from even the thought of the word hunter. They are not hunters. They are killers, they're criminals, they're thieves, and they're stealing this precious wildlife from the lawful hunter who pays for conservation, supports the enforcement of it, and actually applies the wildlife management on the ground. These night killers and the guys that are killing over the limit of bucks, archers especially, will do that. Archers tend to hunt after dark. They tend to hunt over bait. They tend not to tag a little bit more so, at least in my experience. And I'm not impugning all archers. The outlaw archers, not the hunter. I just really want to separate that. These outlaw archers, man, these guys are bad. I've had guys hold me at full draw in the dark. I'd get behind a tree and shuffle my foot in the leaves, and they'd go to full draw and hold it on you. And if you move, you'd have got a broadhead. So that's the clientele we're dealing with. It's not the hunter, not the lawful hunter, and we need to always respect and thank and support lawful hunting, because when you ask that, you can say who cares. It's as a throwaway, it's mention something. Oh, who cares? But when you actually ask that question related to wildlife, who cares? The answer is you and I, the guys that buy the license and support hunting and belong to things like the Rough Grouse Society, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, NWTF. That's the people that care. It's not these guys out there taking advantage and taking over the limit. That's the guy we want. And hopefully we can catch them all.
Yeah.
You can't, but we hope so.
We're very proud and appreciative of what you've done. And so, Mr. Tim, we want to ask you a trivia question. We're going to give you a chance to win a companion's shirt. It's a new, Marcia just brought them back. I've actually got one on. Toxie's got a T-shirt on down there. So we're going to give you a chance to win one of the companion shirts. We're going to ask you a trivia question that we picked just for you.
Today's trivia is brought to you by Sheffield Financial. Explore swift, effortless, and convenient financing for power sports, outdoor power equipment, and trailers, fueling your pursuits in hunting, fishing, and game keeping. More details at sheffieldfinancial.com.
Okay, guys, so we want to thank Sheffield for being a sponsor, but so right now there's one of our listeners who left a review, Classic Grass 22, left a review, and he has won, get this now, he won a copy of Night Killers, Blood Lusting Poachers by our guest, Tim Flanigan.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, Classic Grass 22, you just need to get in touch with us. Left a great review. So remember, if you leave a review, you get a chance to win a prize. So now, Mr. Tim, we've got a question for you, and it's a 3-part. All you have to do is get 2 of the 3, okay?
Oh, my.
All right.
Pressure's on.
Yep, so this is a serious one now. Okay, are you ready? Okay. This is setting the mood right here. Okay, that's enough sound effect, Rob. All right. Wildlife officers can use accurate time of death, TOD, estimates for scientific defendable evidence in court cases involving white-tailed deer to prove that a deer was harvested during illegal shooting hours. What 3 indicators do wildlife enforcement use to determine TOD in white-tailed deer? All you need is 2 of the 3.
Well, one of the things, the key ones is the condition of the eyes. If the pupils are extremely dilated, dried, and hard.
That's one.
Rigor mortis.
Yep. That's 2. You got 2.
Yeah. Any flies or maggots, anything attracted to it, and also smell. If the flesh has been, if the deer's been dressed out, the exposed flesh turns dark very quickly. Exposed flesh being dark or hard, that's another one.
Right. You got them. Yeah. Woo! We also had carcass temperature on.
Yeah,
there,
I was going to say temperature.
Liver temperature.
Yeah,
now that brings up another story I could tell. But
we love a good story.
We had I discovered a remote cabin. I mean, really, really remote, just outside of the edge of state forest, vast state forest, James Buchanan State Forest. It was in another district that I was assigned temporarily. I discovered this cabin in the summertime. It was all overgrown, and the road to it was an absolute goat path. I'm using a 4-wheel drive Jeep and could barely get to it from my side of the county. It was more easily accessed from the other side. So I thought, boy, this. They had a meat pole out behind the house and so forth. And I thought, this is going to be worth a look. So towards fall, getting closer to hunter season, I checked that cabin, and my goodness, it had been all cleaned up. All the brush was cut. The parking place was cleaned out. The brand new meat pole was put up, and a solid stump was placed out behind the kitchen window with a spotlight on it. Oh boy, this is going to be good. So we've set up an illegal act here. So a deputy and I, the night before deer season, which was Monday morning, we parked on a hillside that we were probably best part of a mile from there, maybe 3/4 of a mile, looking across to their hillside. And at 10:30, that light came on and pow, a high-powered shot broke the darkness. We just sat there and said, what should we do? Well, we decided to just leave that area and come back the following night at the end of the first day of deer season. When we arrived at that camp that night, we arrived silently, just coasted into camp with no lights. 2 deputies jumped out of the car. I had 3 deputies with me that night. 2 went behind the house, behind the camp to check on the deer pole, and that was right outside the kitchen window. And my other deputy and I approached the door, and I waited till the 2 deputies came back to tell me what was back there before I knocked on the door. They came back and said there's three untagged bucks hanging back there. Being untagged makes them illegal. And one of them is a dandy. It's a dandy. Eventually I knocked on the door and chatted with these men. Of course, and back then you had to have a roster posted on the camp window listing all the hunters and their license, kind of gun they're using, and any deer kill. If they didn't list deer kills, that was another violation. And the captain of the roster had to be assigned as, maybe Bobby's the captain of the roster. He was liable for anything on there that was illegal or wasn't on there. Anyway, after a long conversation, I finally said, guys, I think I've exhausted the many questions I can ask you. Every way, have you killed a deer? And you've all said, no, we haven't even seen a deer today. I said, you're the captain of the roster? He said, yes, sir. I said, would you please open your window and look out there, and you'll see my 2 deputies standing beside your 3 illegal bucks. Wow, the conversation changed drastically. I asked them all to bring their licenses and step outside, and one by one, we loaded these deer on the rack. And when we put that big 12-point on top, the 2 smaller ones, like a 4 and a 5-point, they started pleading for leniency. So we made a tremendous arrest there for 3 illegal bucks, all kinds of other violations, but cut them a break and only charged them for the 3 illegal bucks. And the fellow said, how did you know about this? I said, well, this 12-point you shot last night at 10:30. And he looked at me, his eyes got wide. He said, how in the H could you know that? I said, because we sat right over there on that hill, saw your light come on and heard the shot. And look at the eyes on this deer. And I showed him all those indicators you just mentioned that we just did on the trivia. Showed him those one by one. He said, well, you got me. But we still gave him leniency. I don't believe on piling on, never did piling on arrests, as far as you didn't fill this out, you didn't fill that out. We lost 3 deer illegally. So we made them pay for those 3 deer. They were non-resident hunters, and they were polite after that, paid their fines, left the state, and never has that camp been used again. They never came back. But it's just having patience and waiting. If we'd have rushed in there that night at 10:30 when that shot was fired, we would have got them for 1 illegal deer. This way, just using our common sense and waiting, being patient, and using those indicators we just talked about, that gave us 3 more illegal deer.
We might need to go turkey hunting up there at that camp. We can figure out where that is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pass, Bobby. He might come out of retirement and catch you up there.
By the way, those guys complained about all the shooting on a camp nearby or a farm nearby, and that was going to be my next stop. When we did go down there, and we found those people with 8 illegal bucks, all untagged, and 7 does in closed season that they had hidden. They spotted 2 deputies in the area, and they'd hidden this stuff from us. We found it all. There was blood everywhere. Oh no, there were 9 illegal bucks. There was one they had a little butcher shop in the basement. There's one still in there. So we made a big arrest with these 3 fellas and the illegal deer, and then like 13 more illegal deer right next door. It's just something that's pervasive in certain rural areas.
Wow. Well, Mr. Tim, we've enjoyed having you on here. And we are we're a big fan of this book. Wish you all the luck in the world. Night Killers, Blood Lusting Poachers. Guys can go to Amazon to purchase it.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it really is. Anybody else got anything to add?
I don't think so. That was a good one.
Yeah,
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, Mr. Tim, we appreciate it. And
and shout out to everybody, thousands and thousands and thousands of law enforcement. We wouldn't have what we have. I say every time they thank us for some little something we do, whatever a happy for a fundraiser or whatever, just something small. And I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, we wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for wildlife law enforcement. We wouldn't have all these people, all this energy, all this industry, all this great life we have with all this, wildlife and hunting, and good grace, we wouldn't have it at all. So just be sure to keep that in context. Are they all perfect? No. None of us are. But without that entity, it dramatically changed this country forever by the way we've enacted the North American, fish and game
model.
Model. So we're really blessed. And be sure, if it's voting for something in your state. I remember when we first started the TV show, it hit me. I didn't know this, and a cousin looked it up. So he's passed away. What our first host ever was Paul Newsome, the actor, and he said, and he was talking at the time, it was actually more rampant than today. It's like anti-hunters were really on the march everywhere, anything to do with hunting anywhere. And he said, so if you call yourself a animal lover and you want to donate money to something that the highest percentage of your dollars are going directly back to save animals that you love, go to your favorite state and buy a hunting license. And it just shocked me. What a great thing to say. And it woke me up, too, to go, that's actually true. Nothing makes a bigger difference than buying that hunting license and all the things that are triggered from it. So everybody just don't forget that, because at the end of the day, he's this way, he's that way, these guys are criminals, these game wardens are bad, or whatever it is, we're all on the same page. The resource unites us all. That's a gamekeeper.
That's right.
Well, Mr. Tim, we appreciate you being with us today. Mr. Tim Flanigan, the book is called Night Killers. We sure appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the honor and the opportunity. I appreciate it very, very much.
Same thing we say to the military. Thank you for your service.
Yep.
Same.
That's right. Why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley. Get us out of here, Rob.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast. And be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.